Hey gang, so we are looking at the new numbers from CIG here as far as their roadmap goes and their progress tracker and all that. I thought it might be fun to kind of do a little predictive sessions. I'm not sure how many of these we'll get before CIG goes on their break and we kind of get a big information drought and these aren't updated as often. So I thought we might kind of do a fun one. Also, we don't know what's going to happen with this next year. They've kind of been dropping hints that they're going to change some things, and I'll get into that after the break too. So if that sounds fun, let's get into this. Okay, so I usually start these off with a couple caveats. The first one being I am just a dude on the internet. So I am just looking at the numbers here, basically what they're telling us, what they've told us in the past, and kind of building inferences off of that. And then I just kind of spit them out at you guys. You guys can take them or leave them. But again, I am just using the data they have. I don't have any insider information or anything like that. If you hear something from CIG that contradicts something that I say, they're probably right and I'm probably wrong. And we'll live with that. The other thing that I like to say, and I think that this might be one of the reasons that the progress tracker might be going away, is that the progress tracker is kind of dubious in what it tells us or the kind of way that it conveys information. So basically what it's doing is it's tracking, these are things that devs are working on, and these are the sprints they're doing. So this is the known work. So they're saying, we're going to work on, for example, Actor Status 2 for 29 weeks. Does 29 weeks mean that that is the full extent that it's going to take to bring in Actor Status 2? No, it could be 28 weeks. They might finish early. It might be 50 weeks. It might be 300 weeks. We don't know. And CIG doesn't necessarily know. So this number here isn't really all that useful. And it's kind of one of the reasons that if you came over here from Reddit, where I did my roadmap and graph forum for years and years and years, one of the reasons I stopped that about 2 weeks ago was because the information wasn't really helpful. It's too ambiguous. It would take too much pre-knowledge to be able to understand what it's actually telling you in a useful way. And I think the progress tracker for CIG might be going the same way. I think they might just sort of say, we have enough stability now. We've gotten to 4.0, which is another thing I think will happen next year. We don't need to do this sort of granular level. We can just do the release view and people rely on it. One of the reasons that they kind of went to this modern view of the release view, where we've got 3.22 right now, we have no idea what's going to be in 3.23 or 4.0. We have no idea what the next patch is or what's going to be in it. It used to be that we'd get 4 patches in advance, and by the time that you get to the second patch in that chain, everything would have changed on it. So the release view is totally unreliable. I think this was kind of their compromise to get us there. But now that the project is kind of moving into the next stage of development, and Squadron 42 is coming along, is probably going to release in the next year, they might start going to less of this quarterly release schedule and more of, in the next patch, this is what we're planning on dropping. And that is much more standard practice for the industry. They tend to say, this is what we're going to give to you when it's ready, when it's done, when we're ready to release it, you will get these features. The two ways you can do it is you can say, you can either do it that way, or you can say, we're going to release it quarterly. And whatever is done at that point in time is what you get, unless that feature has reliances that haven't been created yet. And so that's the two ways they can go. I think they would probably go kind of the industry standard fashion to sort of say, our next patch is the engineering patch. Here's what you're going to get in the engineering patch. It'll be ready when it's ready. Buckle up. I think that that's kind of the direction that they'll go. But anyway, that's something that I think will probably happen next year. After the break, we'll know more. But I think the progress tracker is probably going to go away or change considerably. And this particular show will probably have to change considerably to take that into account, or it might just go away entirely. We'll see. I'm sure they're still going to do the roadmap roundup, and I'll do the show. It just might be shorter and less deeper dived, since we won't have all this information to fall back on. In which case I'll probably have to do what the other content creators do and do a lot more digging into what devs are saying on the dev tracker and kind of pull that information out, which would kind of be dark ages as far as information is concerned. But on the other side, project I think will be in a better place and we won't have to worry about it. So that's out of the way. That's caveats, kind of the update. A real quick update, what I do, or just kind of a real quick description of what I do here, if this is your first time, is I go through and I read the roadmap roundup. Then I go into the release view and just kind of go what the roadmap roundup looks like according to the release view, if there's any big changes or anything weird. And then the meat of this project is I go through the deliverables and I just kind of talk about, I'll usually pick out a handful of features that I think are significant or have made significant improvements, have had significant step backs, or just features that I think are important. It's probably the best way to put it, or that I am personally attracted to. This time, I think, just given that it's the end of the year and they don't even know what's going to be coming out in the next 6 months because they're going to go into their planning sessions from like mid to end of January, I thought it might be fun to kind of go through and talk about what I think is coming in the next year, just based on what I'm seeing and what they've said. And so if that sounds fun, let's get into it. So we'll start here with the roadmap roundup. So notable changes for December 13th, 2023. Release view. Replication layer update. As some of you have seen, testing for the upcoming separation of replication layer from game servers is underway. With additional testing required, as well as fixes and updates coming in 3.22 branch, we are moving this card to the 3.22 column, targeting 3.22.x. We didn't know there was a 3.22.x, now we do. As we continue to make progress on this important update. It is a very important update. Salvage structural. Implementing the ability to transform large chunks of metal salvaged from ships into refinable material, which has caused quite a stir in the community, and how they've chosen to do it. I would just kind of tell people to chill a little bit, but feel free to throw your voices out there of how you would like it to work. I don't think they're going to go back to the claw of the reclaimer being an actual claw that grabs things and then just tears them physically apart. I think that was always going to be a bridge too far, but they kind of proved it with how they're doing this. I think the beam will stay. It will definitely evolve in how it works. We'll get into this a little bit more when I go through the progress tracker, but I think cutting and Maelstrom will have a much bigger role to play in structural salvage eventually. So with that in mind, this will use systems aboard salvage ships like the Vulture and the Reclaimer, which are the two salvage ships we have in the game right now. So yeah, I would say it would be like this. Inventory, cargo containers. This feature will allow players to store items in smaller cargo containers in large cargo containers. That's kind of cool. I didn't consider that before, but now you're going to be able to have, forget what they call them, but like the nesting dolls, you're going to be able to do that. You can have a turducken of cargo containers, but those big cargo containers can hold a lot. You could certainly put like a space bike in there. I think a PTV would fit, like the little golf cart would fit in there. Not sure if the smaller rovers like the STV would fit in there or not. Maybe. Might be worth playing with. Origin X1. Building, implementing, and balancing. Origin's hover bike. The X1 is a flight ready vehicle. And the Velocity, which doesn't have a gun and is a racer. And the X1 Force, which has, I believe, shields is the difference on that one. And the gun is maybe a size 2? I think the X1 has a size 1. Size 2 would be impressive. And here we go. That's all for this year. So this will be the last one of these shows. I do have ideas for other shows I'm going to be doing that aren't roadmap related. Join us for the discussion on Spectrum and check out the Roadmap Companion Guide for more information on Star Citizen Public Roadmap. We'll have a quick update shortly after 3.22 goes live to make sure release view reflects the release into the new year. We'll be back with roadmap updates on February 7th, 2024, once further planning for the year has been completed. And so that whole thing with February 7th, that's kind of what I was talking about, that they go on break for probably about 3 weeks, and then they have planning sessions for about 3 weeks, which usually means we don't get any real information or new shows or anything until early February. Like, I would expect this week of February 7th to be when the information drops. So between now and then, I had an idea. Let me know what you think about this down below. But I thought that would be fun after doing, this is what I think salvage will eventually be, just kind of mild speculation. I was thinking of doing that for most of the loops. So like cargo and trading would be a good one. Science is one that they have a whole ship dedicated to it, and even CIG, it was all pie in the sky as far as what science will be. I'll kind of go through and try to figure out how you would kind of take those ideas and turn them into something that would actually be useful in the game as it is now, or in as how it will be in a little while. Do things on like the repair loop. Basically all of the loops I can think of that aren't obvious. Even something like bounty hunting and how it might change based on what we're seeing. So I'll look for that in the future. With that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the release view. This is basically what is locked in for 3.22, which might even be dropping by the time you see this video. I'm making this Wednesday night. I was supposed to go see a Godzilla, but those plans fell through, and I'm going to go see it on this weekend instead. So updates on Godzilla, not really Star Citizen related, but there you go. Maybe it is. Maybe they'll add Godzilla on some planet. Anyway, all this stuff that's committed is going to be 3.22. The only thing that isn't committed is the replication layer, which seems like it's working pretty well. They just want to make it as smooth as possible. It's going to be 3.22.x. They're kind of running out of time to do a 3.22x in December, so I would assume 3.22 is going to drop now-ish, and then 3.22.1 will probably be dropping around late February of next year, maybe March, which would be a little disappointing because I was thinking that they might be dropping Pyro on us either March or June. Seems like it'll probably be closer to June. So with that said, that is a good segue to go into the progress tracker. So the progress tracker, the way that I set this up, there's actually 2 tabs on this. There's teams, which does give you some pretty good context. It'll tell you how many devs are actually working on these things, and they're the actual teams that those devs work on, which can give you a lot of context. Like if there's one person working on something for 29 weeks, it says one thing. If there's 10 people working on something for 29 weeks, it says something completely different. So let's see. I like to set this, I usually set it on the 2 quarters view because it kind of gives you like a longer version. This time I set it up for 1 quarter because what I'm going to be talking about, it doesn't really matter. I'm not talking about things that are ending in the next week or so. I'm just going to sort of speculate on what's coming down the pike. And let's see, is there anything else? I like to open these up because if you just see this, it gives you very little context. When you have it open, you can actually see when individual teams start and stop working on something. So something might go 79 weeks, but really only have like 2 or 3 weeks of work. Like they worked on it 1 week back here in the beginning, and then they worked on it 2 weeks way at the end, but it just shows one big dark blue line there, whereas the light line tells you the actual working. And then if you want to dig in deeper and drill down, you can go into the teams and you can see actually how many people are working on it. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it. So these are things that I kind of pulled out as things that I would expect to see in the next year. And depending on when 3.22x drops and when 4.0 drops, a lot of these, well, I wouldn't say a lot of these things, most of these things could keep moving, but I would assume that these things that I'm going to talk about, with one or two exceptions that I'll point out, are pretty safe bets for 2024. So let's get into that. Actor Status 2, I think that this will be one of those things that they roll out with the next level of medical gameplay. But I also think that Actor Status 2, one of the reasons we haven't seen it yet is because it's waiting on server stability, which is waiting on the replication layer and server tech and server streaming to all be working so that the NPCs will all be working as they should. Because at this point, NPCs will start reacting to you based on whether you wipe after you take a dump, or I guess you use a bidet, but it does seem like they have toilet paper rolls in the future. So there you go. America won, I suppose, since we're the only ones that don't use bidets. But anyway, moving on. They also have DNA integrity. Medical insurance will be a huge one, because now all of a sudden, when you die, they might actually charge you. Once again, it kind of sounds like in the future, America won. So, yeah, medical insurance, probably have to end up paying for that kind of stuff, and that might determine whether you get a hook for an arm, or you get like a good cybernetic limb, or you have a good clone or something like that if you have good medical insurance. If you're in a bad system like Pyro, you might get a hook for the arm anyway because that's the best thing they have, or you might just not have an arm, which could be a pain in the ass. I'm not sure if they'll go that far. I don't know if they can actually have missing limbs on their character models, but it's a possibility. So look for that sometime next year. I wouldn't look for it early in the year. I would assume this would be something that would drop after 4.0 is established and working. So additional derelict settlements, again, we're getting some in this patch. I say this a lot, but I would expect us to get derelict settlements, new ones, in almost every single patch from here on out, even after the game goes gold. The Idris. So I believe that Squadron 42 is going to drop in Q4 of next year. So Q4 of 2024, I think we're going to get Squadron 42. They let us know that we will get the Idris when Squadron 42 drops. So they didn't say after Squadron 42 drops. They said when. Now, the number of people that actually own an Idris is pretty small and relegated to kind of the whales of the whales. I don't have an Idris, for example. I could probably get one, but I'd have to melt an awful lot of ships to do it, and I don't want to. And as cool a ship as it is, I don't need one. My friend Knight has one, so we'll definitely be using his in the carnival, but it'll still be cool. You'll start seeing Idrises actually going around the verse. It'll be scary days, or very funny days when somebody tries to solo an Idris and everybody's laughing and blowing them up and then salvaging them. Aegis Retaliator. So we should be getting the Retaliator. It even showed up on their scrolling video, which I'll get to at the end of this segment. As far as the ship goes, that'll be cool because we'll get our first modular ship. So those of us who have been waiting for the modular Retaliator, there's the standard version, which is cargo, I think. Obviously the torpedo bomber, which is the one that we have in the game now. There's a dropship version. I think that's it that we know of, are those three modules, but you'll be able to switch those modules out now, in theory. And so that's what that is. They've kind of modernized the inside of it. It is one of the early ships, so a lot like the Starfarer. The corridors are narrow, which I always thought was kind of cool, is like walking around a submarine. But it didn't meet the modern matrix, so that one will be getting its new one. Aerodynamic control surfaces, I think we'll certainly be getting that in the next year. I think things like the aerodynamic control surfaces are one of the reasons they've kind of slow walked the number of ships that they've released this year, and they're all smaller, or mostly smaller, because they have to go back and get all of the ships and add those aerons. And if you don't know what an aeron is, so you basically, if you have a wing and you've got those little flaps that go, an aeron is those wings. But it basically controls the aerodynamics of the wing to increase or decrease lift and drag. And that's what's coming in. I would expect that sooner than later. They'll probably do the master modes, and once they're sure the master modes are kind of dialed in, we'll probably get this. So maybe September, but that's something that they could conceivably drop with Pyro. Okay, I popped open AI landing improvements. We've actually seen this kind of in the verse. If you've ever done the Destroy the Interlopers mission where you go out to the Caterpillar and snipe down all the NPCs that are just standing around the Caterpillar and ignoring you. And then you see the Cutlass come down and land. We're kind of seeing that. That is the AI knowing this is where the ground is. I have to get to the ground and then I have to take off. Expect that to ramp up in complexity once the NPCs are able to do that. Once the NPCs have the bandwidth available on the servers to actually act the way they're supposed to. Because this is this enables AI ships to land and deliver reinforcements, which they're doing now, on non-structured ground areas like planetary terrain, where predefined landing area and assistance from air traffic control is not available. And so what that second part suggests to me, where predefined landing area and assistance from air traffic control, there's going to be AI that can do this in civilized areas. So on top of you coming into a landing zone or a derelict outpost or like any of the towns that they have in, or even some of the cities like Lorville or Area 18, you're going to start seeing a lot of AI traffic coming in and out, which that'll be pretty cool. Right now, if you're coming into Lorville and landing and you see another ship coming in for a landing or taking off, it's a player. It's not always going to be. And that's true for all of these things, that you're going to start seeing NPCs acting more like people. Will they pass a Turing test? No. Will they have untrained combat where those guys in the bunkers, they're just kind of doing this and they'll cower and that kind of stuff? One of them might suddenly roll the dice and say, crap, this guy's going to kill me. I need to pick up a gun. He'll go pick up somebody's gun and then just start shooting wildly at you. And he probably won't hit you, but he'd still be a danger. You're going to start seeing more of that, I would assume. Because this one is a Star Citizen asset. Most of these are Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, but expect to start seeing a lot more pollination because Squadron 42 is, if nothing else, a test bed for their AI. Anvil Legionnaire. We're going to be getting this one the next year, and this one will go along with what I'm going to talk about, one of the ones I'm going to talk about in a bit, and when I do the side scroll. AR map marker system rework. I think that we should probably, I have this one pegged as we get this one Pyro drops, because all of the UI things, the new Mobiglass, the new AR map system, what else is there? The visor HUD, the MFDs, all of those things don't conflict or shouldn't create too many bugs with server meshing and like the aspects of Pyro. Like a new game loop would mess with those things possibly, whereas new UI is kind of its own little thing contained within that. So I could see them rolling out the new UI to us in the same patch they release Pyro. So, or sooner if they don't think Pyro has come along as quickly as they want. Artificial gravity is another thing that's going to be showing up, I'm guessing, pretty soon. Bounty Hunter V2. So this is an example of one of those game loops that I think will not drop immediately with Pyro. I think it'll probably be the patch after or the patch before if they think Pyro's going to be delayed. Like if they don't see the progress with the replication layer and server meshing that they think they should, then they might release bounty hunting to us before and then release Pyro and then we have bounty hunting. But I think probably the most logical way is to drop Pyro, then drop bounty hunting, where you have to go into Pyro that's established and working and the bugs are kind of hammered out to do your bounty hunting. And bounty hunting there will be hard mode. building interiors. So this is one that kind of flew under the radar. They mentioned it briefly in 2022's SitCon. But basically they're going to take the buildings, which are just kind of shells right now. They're just decoration. So just big geometric shapes to make it look like something is there. Now a few of those at least will start having actual interiors that I presume will be procedurally generated to a certain degree. Or they'll have templates for certain types of buildings and then just kind of scatter those through. But you'll have like living areas up top. You'll have business areas down below, like think Starbucks and a cafe or something like that. And then you'll have business in between. And they're even talking about putting in like an underground, like for steam tunnels and stuff like that. Could expand the gameplay in cities in particular by a huge degree. Like you might be able to play in Area 18 for a year or more and never see all the building interiors. Or you might be able to run your own. Who knows? It's pure conjecture, but it will greatly increase the playing area. Character creator. I think we will see the Squadron 42 character creator. Right now we just got some of the hair in a very limited number of hair colors. But the hair looks amazing. Like it is far and away the most realistic hair I've ever seen in a game. And it is something I never knew I needed until I've seen it. Now I'm going to go and look at other games and be like, why didn't you do it like Star Citizen? But I think we'll be getting the character creator and all those other faces in the pretty nearest future. Will be 322.x. Maybe I could see this sort of thing dropping in March. So kind of a quick quality of life feature update I could see dropping before Pyro. So if they have a 323, I could see it being something like the character creator and their traversals and things like that. Things that just sort of make our lives a little bit better. One of the things that'll make our lives a little more difficult is charge and drain. So right now, when you're using those tractor beams and everything, they're limitless. You could turn one on when you begin your session, play all weekend, and then turn it off, and it doesn't matter. At a certain point, those things will run on battery, and how quick they drain, we don't know. But assume that if you are lifting heavy things, it'll probably drain faster. And so many people are reliant on their multi-tools. This will be a game changer. Charge drain will be a very underrated game changer. A lot of people have to change how they play the game because of charge drain. Creature rigging. So I could stop at the individual critters here. The Boreal Stalker, which is the Wampa that lives on Microtech. The Kazi Grazer, which is the Space Cow. What is it? The Oni Crab, whatever that floating thing is with the big nasty teeth. That's basically like the future's rat. They fly around. That one we know is out there. And of course the Stormwalls are all critters out there that we know exist. Good chance once CIG is happy the NPCs are acting the way they should be, they might just start sprinkling those in there. So look for those. I could see Kazi Grazers coming in before that just because they don't need to do much. Like it doesn't matter if a Kazi Grazer is standing on this piece of grass or that piece of grass or just holding still. It's basically a cow. So cows sometimes just hold still and stare at you. As someone who used to live in Montana, I know that. Crusader Spirit. So we have the C1 and the A1 now. What we're waiting on is the E1. Again, that is going to wait on server tech to get up so the NPCs will be good enough that they can walk onto the E1 and sit down, go through a flight, and get off. And then the system, the whatever system they set up for that passenger game loop, will actually score you, like if you took off really hard or you pulled a lot of G's or you took a long time to get there because you have a starter jump drive or something or a quantum drive, you might get dinged. They might give you 3 stars on Yelp. cybernetics concept. So again, going back to the next tier of medical gameplay, I think we might start getting cybernetics. This is just the concept, so this is just the drawings of it. But I would not be shocked if we started getting cybernetics in the game at some point next year, especially if they roll out the next level of health, like the health insurance and all that, which would be a very cool thing to roll out with Pyro, because Stanton is a very high-tech system, very well-provisioned system, very well-traveled, very regulated, whereas Pyro is the opposite of that. So whereas Stanton will have access to the latest cybernetic gear, and probably in droves, they'll have surpluses of it, Pyro might not have any of that. And so again, you might be getting a Captain Hook again, which maybe you prefer. Docking ship to ship. So this is one that only the audio team has worked on. But with the Legionnaire coming in, Legionnaire needs to be able to dock ship to ship. So once the Legionnaire can dock ship to ship, it would make sense that you'd have it that other ships can too, because you're going to have to kind of change the docking rings on ships, like the smaller ones, in order to accommodate the Legionnaire being able to dock with them. So docking ship to ship, even though it only has the audio team, don't be surprised if that team jumps back in early next year. Enemy ships. So this one's actually a Squadron 42 asset, but I wouldn't be surprised as we get closer to Squadron 42 if we actually start seeing a few Vandal ships in there as kind of a teaser and to build up anticipation for the release of Squadron 42. So if I'm right and that's a Q4 thing, Vandal might start showing up in the verse as early as September. Don't bet on that. That's a lot more speculation. That's just, if I were running the zoo, I'd start doing things like that just to kind of build up anticipation, build up hype. And I think that there's another alien out there that we might see too. EVA Tier 2, there's all these traversal things that they worked on through the year that we actually saw at 2022 CitizenCon that I think we could see in the very near future. EVA, sliding, prone, and ladder climbing, and swimming. So there's 5 of them out there. I think we could see all of them pretty early on in next year, probably no later than June, I would think. They looked pretty far along in sitcom, but that's always kind of hard to tell if that is an ideal situation, like not necessarily rigged, but kind of a best case scenario as opposed to a real live game condition. So we could see those as early as March or June, maybe as late as the end of next year, but I would expect to see that next year. Fire Hazard, I would expect to see fire at some point next year. That will drop with the engineering game loop, which the engineering game loop will break a lot of things. So whereas I could see them maybe sneaking the bounty hunting game loop into the Pyro patch, I would be shocked if they dropped engineering at the same time, because engineering will definitely break things, and Fire Hazard will come with that. I would assume they would drop engineering on us after Pyro. So hopefully Pyro drops in like March to June as opposed to September. Fire Rat's Armor. Speaking of fires, these guys are a gang in Pyro, so we'll see them when Pyro drops, hopefully before June. Flak ammunition, charging those big ships might be a bit more risky right now. If you're a light little fighter running around in like a Buccaneer or an Arrow or anything like that, you can take out something like an Idris, provided you have enough time, because their turrets aren't quick enough to continuously hit you with damage. But if they have flak ammunition, suddenly that accuracy is accuracy by volume, and that's a big deal. FPS radar scanning, another UI thing, I could see that coming in. Freight elevators will definitely be making an appearance, maybe sooner than later. I wouldn't be shocked if this were a 322.x thing, like they bring in freight elevators. Could talk Raelian. So again, this is not the Sulian, this is the Raelian, this is the bigger one, the one that's almost Starfare sized. They have said they've started to work on it, even though it doesn't look like they have. So they're at least talking about it. I would assume at next year's Alien Week, I would be surprised if we didn't hear about the Railin at that point. Will it be coming out next year? So there's a few ship things that I'm kind of chewing on that I'll get to this at the end of the show, but they're spinning up new devs to work on stuff. And as Squadron 42 is wrapping up, they'll start moving more devs over to the backlog of ships. And that'll mean they'll have more bandwidth to start knocking out some of these ships. And I'll get to that later. Okay, so there's a couple Grey Cat industrial tools here that I was going to talk about. We have the industrial tractor tool, so it's the one that kind of looks like a bazooka and has like a Tron disc on the front of it. But they also have an industrial cutter tool, which you will probably need for salvage, an industrial salvage backpack, and the industrial salvage tool. So the cutter will cut the ship up, or the target up, is my guess, because this is a lot larger than like a little handheld one. I'm assuming this is for like cutting up ships, and at a guess, you're not going to be able to cut a ship up while it still has shields up and power. Will you be able to use that as a weapon? I would think so. I would think a cutter would do a hell of a lot of damage. So CIG is going to have a hell of a time balancing that. Like the cutter would have to use a lot of power, or they're just going to say you can't use it on living tissue and like hand wavium it away. The Grey Cat Steve. So I wanted to talk about the STV because I am actually wanting to talk about the RTV, which is right here. So the RTV is just the Jeep version of the STV. We know the concept obviously made it pretty far. It's not a very complicated vehicle, so it's probably just waiting for the right time to drop. Next year would be a pretty good time, especially if they get a lull in the number of ships that they're releasing. They could just kind of be like, and here's the RTV. There you go. Merry Christmas. Yay. It probably won't be Christmas. But the RTV is out there somewhere. Hacking Tier 0. We're not going to get Hacking Tier 0. Or I should say we're not going to get the Legionnaire until Hacking Tier 0 is in. So once you see the Legionnaire coming on, you know hacking is close behind. Hacking is one of those that, since it's mostly a UI loop, I would assume, not even assume, I would speculate that hacking would drop with Pyro because it would have nice synergy with like a lawless outlaw system. You're hacking things. Makes sense to me. Hospital surgeon. So again, talking about NPCs and them acting normal. Sometimes I think if you have, I think it's New Babbage, if New Babbage is your home and you respawn there, occasionally, like one time out of 10, you'll actually have a surgeon saying, hey, welcome back. And they'll just be standing in the room. They might have a much more active role to play along with the hospital nurse once the NPCs are actually acting like they should. Like this guy might be like, hey, you need to wait until we have this thing on you, or hey, you're going to have to sit here for a couple minutes while this thing runs its course. It might be a little bit more visceral than just waking up, you sit up, you throw down, you pull off your gown, throw it on the floor, and run out the door and sprint down to the thing. It might be more of a process. Jump points. Obviously, we're going to be getting jump points, and we'll get to see what the new versions look like once we get Pyro. Ladders, another traversal thing. Law system improvement. So this is an old one. I'm just using it as an example that along with Quantum coming in, the law system will start really kicking in. Like if you are out there doing stuff in Pyro, it won't matter as much. But now that you have Pyro to go to, if you have a criminal record, they might start really locking down. Like right now, you just kind of, hey, let me scan you. It might just be like, hey, we know exactly who you are. Eat torpedo, and here you go. Levski. I think what we're going to start hearing about pretty much immediately after Pyro drops is the Nyx system, and Nyx is where Levski is. Nyx is almost certainly going to be the next in the line, and I would say after that, there's a few other systems out there. Terra, I think, is probably 2 or 3 away, so they'll drop Nyx, they'll drop another couple sort of interim systems, and then they'll drop Terra on us, and Terra will be our first, like, capital system, because it's technically kind of the counterpoint to Sol system. But as far as Levski goes, I am thinking by the end of next year, we'll be hearing a lot about Nyx system. And it'll be the road to Nyx after that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they drop a couple systems on us when they drop Nyx. Life support tier 0 coming with the engineering loop. Map and radar system rework going to be coming with all those UI improvements. Again, I would suspect that that would be something that they would drop at least with Pyro, or if they need like a cleanup patch after they drop 322, even 322X, they might drop all of these UI things on us just as a quality of life thing. Master modes are going to totally change the way we fly around the verse, and we're going to be getting those sooner than later. March of next year, I would say. Probably master modes. That's not beyond the pale. MFD rework, again. UI change that's going to drop. I would assume they're going to drop them all at once. Military multi-tool. So this one is one that's exclusively for Squadron 42. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts popping up as a loot in the verse. Essentially what it is it's a multi-tool, but as opposed to having to change out the component on it, you just kind of flip a switch on the back. So you're like, now I want a tractor beam. Now I want a salvage beam. Now I want a whatever. That's what the military multi-tool does. So very cool, very useful, perhaps a little bit overpowered, because if you have one of those, you never need any of the little components for the regular multi-tool. Mystical Sea. So I am going to probably do a video on this one just to kind of show, like in the last week, I've been doing a few Mystical Sea runs because it kind of works now. CIG knows there's problems with this loop, but I don't believe in saying, hey, you screwed this up without offering a solution. I do think that we will start seeing some of the bigger holes start coming onto the drawing board, especially if they do start spinning up more teams. I've said this before, but whereas 2024 is going to be the year of RSI, I would think 2025 is going to be the year of MISC. Like, MISC has a lot of outdated ships at this point, and that badly need an update, and that would be a good time to just kind of pull these out. Now that they have the whole sea, and they kind of have the animations working, the ship itself works great. It's the loop surrounding the ship that I have a problem with. We'll get into that. The Odyssey, too. Would not be shocked if that's a 2025 asset. Mobiglass rework, again, another UI one. New mission cargo hauling. So, speaking of the whole sea, this is kind of where the whole sea will shine, because you can take a hauling mission, which is somebody is just renting space on your ship. You're not paying for the cargo, which is trading, and I have a show that I'm going to do on this, the trading hauling loop. But trading is you buy the thing yourself and you find a person who wants to buy it. Hauling is somebody is saying, hey, Smokey and the Bandit kind of a deal, I need you to take this cargo, whatever it is, from point A to point B. So these are the cargo hauling missions. And hopefully with those, you would not have to go into the station, get the cargo, go out of the station, get on your ship, fly to the cargo loading bay, unload the stuff, fly back, dock, go into the station, get the stuff, go back, go out, reload, and then go to the next station. Repeat that process. That is a lot. But anyway, cargo hauling should be pretty cool. Give whole seas more to do. I'm assuming what you would get paid would be based on danger, and danger could both be defined on, there's a high percentage chance that somebody waylays you along the way, and so somebody will pull you out of quantum while you're jumping across Stanton system, or they'll say, we need you to deliver this to Pyro, which obviously will pay, that'll be like your 20k or 100k mission, is pyro is obviously going to be dangerous, and you're obviously going to have to probably hire people to man the turrets in the ship and hire people to escort you to at least distract people long enough for you to get away. Data Heist is another mission. Dropped in 321. It's kind of cool. It's the ones that are down the bunkers where you've got to hit the button and you kind of have to steal the stuff while people are kind of pouring in. Expect that one to evolve. I would be shocked if they don't keep building and building and building on that, especially when they introduce the new underground. Steal, recover cargo. This is kind of the dark side of trading and hauling. You're going to have to catch up to another ship that has either stolen something, and that could be a player or an NPC, and get that cargo back. So you're not going to be able to blow up the ship, because then you're going to be blowing up the cargo that you're supposed to recover. You're going to have to board them. This would be a great ship to drop with the Legionnaire in that gameplay, along with the whole ship-to-ship docking. And hacking, because you could actually shut down the other person's ship. Hopefully. NPC schedulers, just kind of get this. I just picked one with NPC in the name, but NPC scheduler is a good example. A lot of these things have been done for ages. It's just the servers weren't good enough to allow us to actually do it. And so now that the servers are going to start acting better and be better behaved, they're going to actually have NPCs. They're acting more like the NPCs should. And this is part of that. 600i gold standard. They kind of swallowed this one in the last couple of years. So the 600i, I thought for sure was going to be dropping with the X1. I thought they were going to drop them both. They seem to have gotten it pretty far along in the concept, even up to the point where they're showing off a Tonk being docked or landed in the cargo bay. Looked awesome. And then nothing. And I was for sure that they were going to talk about it in Talking Ship this year. Nothing is crickets. So I think that that's one that's waiting dev resources. So hopefully when they start spinning up more teams, we get that. The Origin G12 is their rover. Expect that one in the next few months. It's not a huge rover. It's somewhere, I think, between Cyclone and Ursa size. So not a big vehicle. A lot like the Origin X1, which we're getting hopefully by the time you're watching this. It's one of my favorite rovers just from the design of it. Who knows how it'll be in game. I'm assuming it will be under-armored and under-gunned, but it'll drive well. But it's cool looking. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Space Dad. Orson mascot suit. So I pointed this one out. Again, NPCs running around just kind of making the place feel more real and more lived in. Orson will have the person in the Stormwall mascot suit, and you'll get to see him bouncing around, maybe making balloon animals or something. Who the hell knows? Persistent Habs, Persistent Hangars. I would expect these to drop at the same time as freight elevators. It would make a lot of sense to drop those at the same time. Basically, Persistent Habs are just, you actually live in this room, other people aren't spawning in there, so you're not going to wake up and they'll just be like trash all over the floor because someone else spawned there and just sort of said, I don't want this nightgown or whatever, and throws it on the ground or drank their water or whatever. You know what I'm saying. Persistent Hangars, same thing. I honestly, from back in the day when all we had were the hangars, I think as many people might be living in their ships in their hangars as they will in their habs, depending on how cool they make those habs. I think the role players will probably spend a lot of their time in their habs. I think everyone else will spend a lot of time in their hangars. Persistent server and streamer meshing. Yeah, that is what I meant to say, totally. Persistent streaming and server meshing. We're living it, baby. Physical damage and breakability, this Maelstrom coming out, looks pretty cool. Obviously, they're going to iterate on it. I think that this is required for true vehicle munching, or structural, salvage structural. I think eventually, right now, you just magically blow up the ship and then you dissolve pieces of it. I think eventually what you'll be doing is like taking a beam and cutting the thing into pieces that will make it the right size for the ingester to take it in and grind it up and turn it into stuff. Player reflection. So this is one they did ages ago. Again, I would assume that this is one that reflections, even way back in the day when they first started showing up, I think in like Half-Life, like the original Half-Life, might have been Half-Life 2. I just remember the first time people saw reflections, they were like, oh, it's so cool. The problem with reflections is that the way that they're done is the computer is basically redrawing everything behind you that you can't see onto the mirror, and that's what's happening. So it basically doubles the number of polygons because the computer doesn't have to draw what's behind you. Now it does. And so reflections are kind of a pain in the ass when it comes to resources, especially in a multiplayer game. So this one might be on ice or have a pen in it. I would assume they're going to be very, very judicious where they put reflective surfaces, like truly reflective surfaces like mirrors. Like it's going to be in small bathrooms or small rooms. They're never going to have like an endless mirror where you got two mirrors facing each other going off into nowhere. You're never going to be able to pull those things off the wall because you could crash a server just by pointing it at, say, ship combat. But player reflection, I would expect to see it at some point next year. I don't know. Maybe if the servers are doing real well, that's one they pull off, blow the dust off of, and be like, sneak it in there. They always sneak a couple things into every single patch. You'll just be walking into the bathroom on your ship to take care of hygiene, and all of a sudden you'll be able to actually see yourself in the mirror. Another advantage of the mirrors is the same way that Cyberpunk utilizes it. You can actually change your appearance in the mirror. Another good way to do it. Prone, traversal option. Pyro space stations we'll get when we get Pyro, hopefully by June. Quantum simulation, again, waiting on the server tech. Hopefully the server tech, we're not going to get Pyro until we get the server tech, so it's going to be server tech, Pyro, and then quantum simulation, bounty hunting, and all of these NPC sort of bigger things that require NPCs to be working. All that'll be there. Quantum travel experience, this looks like it's actually something that's coming real soon. So if it's not in 322, it'll probably be in 322X. So by March of next year, we should have the new quantum travel, which looks pretty cool. Radar scanning and ping. This is the one that was released in 314. I wouldn't be surprised if we're getting the new radar early on in next year. Like if they do a quality of life patch, that's when I'd expect to see it. Rastar. So in theory, at the end of SitCon, they said, everything we've shown you is something we hope to get to you in the next 12 months. One of the things they showed was base building. So I don't think that we're going to actually get the Pioneer landing and dropping things. I think it'll be very rudimentary of you take a land beacon, you put it down, and almost in the same way that Starfield works, you'll just have a template and you'll sort of be like, this building here, this one attaches here, this one does it here. They couldn't do it worse than Starfield did, so I look forward to seeing what they pulled off. What they showed off at SitCon was pretty cool. It looks like they've got a few modules ready to go, so yeah, I think we'll get like tier 0 of base building by the end of next year. It might be very tier 0 and very rudimentary, but the actual gameplay itself is well understood and has been done in other games for a decade and a half now. So CIG will certainly put its own little spin on it, and they want to put those rules in there. But those rules can be narrowed down over time and sort of zeroed in. So with Rastar working, it's really sort of a UI problem. How do you want the player to interact in the universe to create their own outposts? That's the problem they have to solve. I would expect that to be more of a December thing at the earliest. Refinery ships. I would think we will probably see refinery ships next year. It's kind of the last missing piece of the mining loop. That and like the giant asteroids that things like the Arastra and the Orion eat. but those are just assets. Refinery ships are kind of the last piece of the actual loop. Like you have the ore, you create the ore, now you can refine the ore into a final product. Also a huge part of repair and crafting. Refiner ships will have a gigantic thing. They'll be a big bridge. Reputation hostility, so especially with Pyro, I would think that this one's going to be dropping with Pyro. Pyro is run by various gangs. None of those gangs like each other. So if you're really, really, really good in with Rough and Ready, Xenothreat might hate you. If you're good with Xenothreat, the Fire Rats might hate you, and so on. And since each station is controlled by one gang or the other, even though there may be 3 stations between you and where you want to get to, so you have plenty of places you could refuel, if all of those in the chain are hostile to you because only these guys are your ally, then you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have to think of some way to get around that or stay neutral, in which case you're not getting the benefits of being an ally with them, which means you're probably not getting the best missions, the best cargo, the best gear, the best repairs in a place like Pyro. So reputation is going to start really, really, really mattering, which brings us down to reputation AI again, or UI. Again, this is something that dropped in 3.13. I'm just using it as an example. Reputation is the advancement in this game. The skills that you as a player have are the skills that your character in the game has. So my ability to fly, or not fly as it may be, is my character's skill. Like, if I were to train with Avenger 1 in the gang and become a really good dogfighter, that's me learning it. I'm not just applying skill points to my flying technique, and now all of a sudden I'm a better flyer. You get the idea. Reputation is actually the advancement in this game. Like, your reputation will matter, and it'll start mattering more and more and more as this game goes on. Not just with gangs, but with anyone. And when you die, you're going to lose that reputation. You're going to have to start from scratch. When you final die, death of a spaceman die. Which is going to be one of the advantages of coming back to life, but that's also one of the disadvantages, because eventually that clone will fail, and that'll be final death. And then you'll have to make another character, and that character won't have all of that reputation. You'll have to start from scratch. Resource management. It should be coming with engineering, but of course it'll have loads of knock-on effects with multi-crew and pretty much anything like that. It's going to have huge, huge, huge knock-on effects. I would expect to see that one near September. I'm kind of pegging Pyro for June, and then I think September will kind of be like the big game loop patch. The RSI Apollo. So they're ripping out a bunch of RSI ships this year. So there are some ships that I think they haven't really talked about in a while, but I think are definitely on the drawing board and will probably be worked on and released this year. The Apollo is one of them. And again, I would expect that to release with the new medical gameplay. I've heard people are expecting the Galaxy this year. Don't expect the Galaxy. Some people were saying the Polaris is going to be dropping in June in-game chat, and I was like, no, there's no way. He's like, oh yeah, somebody said it. And I was like, I don't care who said that, they're wrong. The Polaris is a gigantic ship. It's going to take a long time to make. SitCon of next year is when I would think the window opens on the Polaris dropping. But there are smaller ships like the Apollo and the Zeus that I think could drop by September or so. The Constellation, I would not be shocked with all of these new RSI assets that they're making. They might swing back and do an update pass on the Constellation. If they're going to do that, I would expect to hear about that sometime in February or March. Galaxy is going to come after the Polaris, so 2025. If they've really spun up a lot of teams, they might try to knock it out. I'd just be surprised. It's a big ship. So I would say they might start working on it this year, or 2024, but expect it to launch in 2025. Vehicle munching. This is not the final iteration of vehicle munching or vehicle structure. We're going to be getting more on this. This is just kind of, they were told, get this out by the end of the year, and they got it out by the end of the year. it's by no means final. Think of it as tier 0.1 is kind of what we're looking at right now for structural salvage. Security network V1, again, kind of expect this to roll out. I wouldn't be shocked if this rolled out with engineering, if they rolled out kind of some sort of, in hacking, some sort of method of permissions, is something that's badly missing from the game right now. The ability for your friends or your org mates to log onto your ship when you're not in the game. So if I log out on your ship and we're friends or we're org mates, and I log back in and you're on vacation for 3 months, I can now just kind of run around on your ship and do stuff. And you could set permissions that sort of say, okay, Mike has like captain and pilot controls, like he can do anything on the ship, but Chuck, I don't really trust Chuck. Chuck can go into the cargo bay and he can't spawn on the ship when I'm not here, kind of a deal. That's got to be coming. Is that going to be security network in the V1? I kind of doubt it. I think this will kind of be more counter hacking, but we'll find out soon enough. Shield emitters. So again, I just kind of picked one that had the right name. We're going to have emitters for things. You're going to have capacitors so that if you know a point on the ship to hit, you can knock out very specific things. So you can knock out the life support if you know the life support is roughly here on a ship, or you can knock out the shields if you hit that place. You get the idea. Knowing a ship, again, your knowledge as a player is going to be something as important as reputation. It's going to be your character advancement. Solar burst. So we know we're getting this with Pyro. A few people have kind of talked about this. I think they talked about it in a Around the Verse, or what do they call it now? Inside Star Citizen, where they were talking about the big solar burst, and the devs didn't know about the solar burst. They were like, oh, we're going to look at it and we're going to take it. And then they took lethal doses of radiation and died. Yeah, solar bursts are going to be kind of cool. We're going to get with Pyro. So again, June. Space mines, I've been saying for a long time that I expect to see space mines as a new interdiction. So you'll be going along in Quantum. All of a sudden you'll be dragged out and it will literally be a space minefield. So like Galaxy Quest. Squadron 42 polishing. Of course, this is a huge one. End of next year is kind of what I'm calling. They're going to build up the... they're going to kind of play at mum until around June. And then they'll definitely have to start kicking up the advertising for it around June and really building up hype. So expect to see a lot of things around Squadron 42 then. The good thing is that by the time they hit that point, most of the devs that were working on it will kind of be starting to shift over to the PU, which is cool for us. Swimming, another of those traversal things I think will be coming. Theaters of War. I think Theaters of War is awesome. I like playing it. I'm an old school joint operations player. I was world ranked in that one, which of course I think that game came out 15 years ago at least. So yeah, not recently was I world ranked, but I used to be. But Theaters of War is very similar to joint operations. Joint operations have a very special place in my heart, and this could be a very, very, very fun game, both for testing things, testing like team play, but also just kind of jump in and do a match real quick. Yeah, I could see Theaters of War being pretty fun. Tracking app, this will drop with the bounty hunting gameplay. It's basically just a thing that your target was last seen here. So it's supposed to have in the God marker, it's your target was last seen here. You go to that location and they're not there anymore. And then it says your target was seen here. Now you're a little bit closer to their location. So you go to that location. Now you're only like an hour behind them. Then you're 30 minutes. Then you're 10 minutes. Then you're 5. Then you're pulling up to the same location they are. Vending machine utilization. So this one is really just kind of, I kind of picked it because I thought it was cool. You're going to start seeing the NPCs doing neat stuff like interacting with vending machines and interacting with the console games and stuff over there. Could be cool. Visor lens rework, again, another UI thing. Volt parallax. So I've been speculating that the volts will be sort of sneaking into loot boxes and stuff probably throughout next year. I think they're kind of saving them for Squadron 42, which is too bad, but if they aren't, we should start seeing them pretty soon. Weapon misfire and aware. So this is one that I'm kind of worried about because unlike ships, which we've been able to fix since the Cryastro days, we've never had to fix our guns. And it's not like you can just take your gun to the landing pad, drop it on the landing pad and say, repair this. We don't know how to repair them or make them better. So, yeah, weapon misfire and wear is coming though. So if you're dragging your gun through the dirt, expect to be an issue. And so as promised, the other alien that I think might be dropping in addition to the Van Duel, Jian. I think we might actually see Jian towards the end of next year. Maybe not too many, but I think that there's a reason why they push the Sulian out, and there's a reason why they're pushing out the Raylan, is because they're going to be dropping Jian into the game, like our first friendly aliens. Which is kind of surprising because of all the alien races, the non-hostile ones, well, I guess the Jian are mildly hostile. Banu would seem to make more sense, but for whatever reason, it's not. And so my apologies on this. A little bit of the screen, like right over here, is going to get cut off, but I think enough will be there that I can actually show you what I'm talking about. So this is the backlog, and this is what I was talking about, where this is how many ships they've released, this is how many ships are unreleased, this is how many ships they added to the backlog. I believe we know they're releasing, sort of depends on whether you consider the X1 one box or 3 boxes, and that goes for a lot of these. Presumably a few of these unreleased are going to be ones that are in concept that they haven't told us about yet. But there you go. That is what the backlog is this light colored one and these dark blue colored ones. During this talk here, okay, so here you go. So over 200 vehicles exist for us to support. Not all are player ownable or flyable. Some are Squadron 42 exclusive. Some are AI exclusive. All of them are supported by our team. So that is all of those. Hang on, one. So that's 15 across. Yeah, that's over 200. All right, I'll buy that. One of the things they were going to talk about was spinning up new teams. And so they're saying they're growing teams here. There's 5 vehicle artists, 1 vehicle designer, and 1 QA tester at Montreal. They're talking about bringing on even more. You're going to have the people, all of the devs that were working on Squadron 42, which there is no small number of shipbuilding devs that are working there. They'll have to get spun up on the PT or on the PU because it's a different situation, sort of same ships, but I'm sure they kind of have a different process for working through and making the models and everything. But once they're spun up, they could start knocking out that backlog pretty quick. And so this is the one that I kind of wanted to go into. And so 2023 right here, you have 21. I believe these are the teams or the devs. I believe these are the devs. They got 21 devs making ships. Now they'll have 28. And granted, the scale on this is goofy, so it looks like 28 is billions more. It's not. They're adding a few more. But the big thing will be the devs that are working on Squadron 42 will be coming over. And so they don't have to be trained on what Star Citizen is or what the ships look like. They might need to be trained on different style guides than they're used to working on, but that should be an easier transition than pulling on someone who's brand new. So I would expect that we'll start to see some of the backlog get knocked out. As a dark horse for next year, while I don't think they're actually going to be working on the Banu Merchant, well, they might start working on it again. I would expect to have another update on the Banu Merchantman, especially with them spinning up teams, because them putting the Banu Merchantman on ice pissed off a lot of people, because this is, I believe, the oldest concept ship now that is not represented in the game. So I'm sure they want to get back to it as soon as possible. They just lost the 2 devs that were basically the only 2 devs working on it. And they lost, is his name Paul? I think his name was Paul. Like one of their lead guys who had been there from the start. He left to kind of go off and do his own thing. And when they lost him, it was a huge brain drain on things like this, like how to make these spectacular interiors and all of this. And he really knew the minds of both Chris Roberts, but also the concept artists, and could come up with concepts on his own. I would not be surprised if the Banu Merchantman comes back online. Not necessarily it'll get finished. I would expect it the earliest to be a 2025 asset. But I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back in production. So that's just kind of like a little surprise, wild speculation thing. You can sort of see they got it pretty far along. They just ran out of devs to work on it. This room is goofy. They need to do something with that room. And the final thing I'll say is that this particular segment where they sort of said, look at all this cool stuff and how far we got with the Banu Merchantman. Anyway, you're not seeing it and we don't know when we're going to work on it. Bye. That kind of really ticked people off too. So I kind of get the sense that there's a clock ticking in the back of their heads that, hey, we kind of need to get this thing out the door sooner rather than later. Hopefully that was what they took from that. So let's take a little stroll through the upcoming ships. That little bike, I want that. We're getting the X1 now. I don't know what this is. Maybe a variant of the Ursa. MPUV. We'll be getting that eventually. It's basically going to come with modularity. I am pretty sure that is the E1, even though, hang on, we're going to back that up just a... I'm pretty sure that's the E1, even though the E1 kind of has a hump up here where the passengers can sit and see out. Pretty sure this is the E1. It does look like it has both an elevator and a cargo sled down here. Not a cargo sled, but a cargo elevator, which might make sense for a passenger ship. Like your passengers drop stuff off here and then they can go up the elevator here, as opposed to having to walk up the ramp in the back. Pretty sure that's a Spirit. So for a while there, about a month, I was thinking this was the Cillian, which it certainly looked big enough to be like a medium GN ship. If you believe Pipeline, and there's no real reason not to, this is a Mirai heavy fighter. The heavy fighter part surprises me, but it definitely does have Mirai lines to it. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was a big ship. I could see it more being a long distance racer, since that's kind of Mirai's bag, but I don't know. Heavy fighter. Again, I don't think it makes sense, but who knows. Legionnaire, definitely getting that in the next year. That'll come with the hacking loop, I would assume around September. That's the Zeus. Again, they want to drop that around IE of next year. Retaliator, again, we should be getting modularity with the Retaliator. And of course the Polaris, end of next year. And gang, that's all I got for this one. Yeah, let me know what you think down below, and catch me next time.